You think the most powerful women in history are only the ones who led armies, conquered empires, or ruled nations. Think again. Today, we are uncovering a woman who achieved absolute global immortality, captured the human imagination for 5 centuries, and commands billions of dollars in modern cultural value, all without ever speaking a single word. Her face is the most recognized in human history, yet her true story remains buried beneath layers of myth. She is made of paint, but her power is completely real. Her name was Lisa Gherardini, known to the world simply as the Mona Lisa. Before she was a canvas hanging inside a bulletproof glass casing in the Louvre Museum, she was a flesh-and-blood human being walking the streets of Renaissance Florence. Born in 1479 to an old aristocratic family that had lost its political wealth, Lisa lived a life defined by quiet, unyielding personal resilience. At 15, she married a wealthy cloth and silk merchant named Francesco del Giocondo, navigating a society that demanded absolute female submission. She weathered intense personal tragedy, suffering the loss of multiple children during infancy, yet she remained the unshakable bedrock of her household. In October 1503, her husband commissioned a local middle-aged artist named Leonardo da Vinci to paint her portrait. Da Vinci was notorious for abandoning his commissions, finding the standard portraits of wealthy elites entirely uninspiring. But when Lisa Gherardini sat in his studio, the dynamic completely shifted. Lisa was not a passive model to be arranged. She possessed a formidable personal gravitas and an unbreakable moral compass. She had recently made waves in Florentine social circles for flatly rejecting the predatory advances of 2 powerful elites from the dangerous ruling Medici dynasty, choosing her personal honor over political favors. When she looked at Leonardo, she did not look down in modesty as Renaissance women were legally and socially expected to do. She stared directly back at him. This psychological standoff between the model and the artist completely changed the trajectory of art history. Leonardo became so intensely consumed by the power of her real-life presence that he abandoned all his other lucrative contracts. He spent the next 16 years modifying, refining, and obsessing over this single wood panel, refusing to ever hand it over to her husband. He carried it across the Alps to France, keeping it in his possession until the day he died. The true genius of the Mona Lisa is that Leonardo didn't invent a masterpiece out of thin air. Instead, he engineered entirely new architectural designs in oil painting specifically to capture the real-world strength of Lisa Gherardini. Every revolutionary physical technique on that canvas is a direct structural manifestation of her personality. First, consider the physical framework of her body. Da Vinci anchored her in a strict, geometric pyramidal composition. Her hands cross firmly at the base, and her head forms the absolute apex of a heavy, immovable triangle. In the Renaissance, this specific architectural structure was strictly reserved for religious paintings of God or the Virgin Mary. By placing an ordinary woman into this sacred geometric frame, the composition gives her an unshakable, permanent throne of authority. She is visually impossible to tip over or diminish. Second, examine the horizon line behind her. The wild natural landscape is deliberately unaligned. The horizon line on the left side of her head is physically lower than the horizon line on the right. This creates a brilliant optical illusion. When the viewer looks at her left side, she appears significantly taller and more dominant. When looking to the right, she appears lower. By warping the physical geography of nature around her, the architecture of the painting forces the environment to bend to her stature. Third, look at her gaze. She does not yield. Her slight bodily twist toward the viewer, combined with eyes that follow you across the room, strips the viewer of their dominance. She is not a passive object on display. She possesses active agency, evaluating and judging the person standing in front of her. Finally, the architecture of her face is built entirely on the physics of light and shadow, using a technique called sfumato. Leonardo applied dozens of micro-thin, translucent layers of oil glaze over a decade, erasing all sharp lines and hard borders around her eyes and the corners of her mouth. Because there are no fixed borders, her expression shifts depending on how human optics process the light. Look away and she smiles. Look directly at her lips, and the smile vanishes. She forces the viewer's own brain to try and decode her, leaving her in complete control of the interaction. Her famous expression is not a mystery. It is the ultimate psychological boundary of a woman who keeps her own secrets. Lisa Gherardini passed away in 1542 at the convent of St. Orsola, living her final years in quiet, independent autonomy surrounded by a community of women. She died entirely unaware that her face would conquer the world. The Mona Lisa does not endure because of a painter's solitary genius. The Mona Lisa endures because the raw, unshakable power of an ordinary Florentine woman forced the greatest genius in human history to rewrite the laws of art just to contain her.